What if I told you we've built a second plastic planet inside our real one, and tiny pieces of it are now in our air, food, water, and even us? Today we'll follow microplastics from their hidden sources into our daily lives, explore what they might be doing to our bodies and the environment, and end with a realistic plan to reduce exposure without panic, without doom. Let's zoom in. Microplastics are plastic fragments smaller than 5 millimeters, about the size of a sesame seed and down. If you're thinking, millimeters, should we call them milliplastics? Great joke, but scientists already use microplastics. And for even smaller particles below 1 micrometer, nanoplastics. Why do we care about size? Because smaller particles travel more places through water, air, soil, and potentially through biological barriers. Nanoplastics are so tiny they might pass from the gut or lungs into the bloodstream and reach organs. We'll come back to that. Some microplastics are made tiny on purpose. Think microbeads, which have been mostly phased out. Glitter, and plastic pellets used to make products. But most are born from wear and tear. Larger plastics, shedding fibers, and fragments. Major everyday sources include synthetic clothing, polyester, nylon. Washing and wearing release microfibers. Tires. Road abrasion creates tire wear particles that drift into air and stormwater. Paints. Buildings, ships, road markings flake into microplastics. Food and drink packaging, especially when heated or abraded. Kitchenware. Plastic cutting boards shed microparticles when chopping. Hot drink bags and cups. Some plastic tea bags and hot drink lids can release large numbers of particles at brewing temperatures. Bottled water. Recent analyses count hundreds of thousands of nanoplastics per liter in some samples. Indoor dust. Carpets, couches, and clothes constantly shed. We breathe and ingest that dust. These sources don't mean panic. They mean prioritize. We'll rank practical fixes later. So how exactly do these tiny plastics get into us? The most obvious way is through what we eat and drink. They've been found in bottled water, tap water, salt, honey, seafood, even in beer and other drinks. And whenever plastic is exposed to heat, say hot soup in a plastic container or tea brewed with a plastic tea bag, the number of particles that leach out can rise dramatically. In some cases, a single plastic tea bag steeped in boiling water released billions of micro and nanoplastics into one cup. But swallowing them isn't the only route. We also breathe them in. Indoors, tiny fibers and fragments shed constantly from carpets, couches, clothes, and even the interior of cars. Those particles float in the air we breathe. In fact, indoor levels are often higher than outdoors, simply because of all the synthetic materials that surround us inside our homes. And here's where it gets even more concerning. The smaller the particle, the further it can travel inside us. Nanoplastics are so tiny that they don't just stay in the gut or lungs. Researchers have already detected them in blood, in placentas, in breast milk, in arteries, in lung tissue, in reproductive fluids, and even in organs after death. That tells us these particles can cross biological barriers and circulate through the body. So the big picture is this. Exposure is not just possible, it's widespread. But the effects depend on how many particles you're exposed to, how small they are, what kind of plastic they're made of, and the environment you live in. Let's be clear right away. Not every plastic particle automatically harms us. But the evidence is shifting. We're moving from simply knowing they're everywhere towards seeing specific effects on our health, especially when the particles are small or when they carry extra chemicals. Take the heart and blood vessels, for example. Scientists have actually found microplastics inside arterial plaques. And in one large clinical study, patients with plastic in their plaques had a noticeably higher risk of heart attacks and strokes over the next few years. Now that doesn't prove plastics directly cause those events, but it's a strong warning sign. The lungs are another story. We know that fibers floating in the air, especially indoors, can settle deep into the lungs. Workers who inhaled high levels of plastic dust in the past develop serious lung disease. Our everyday exposures are lower, but they're constant. And the evidence suggests they can drive inflammation in lung tissue. In the gut, animal and lab studies show that microplastics can disrupt the protective gut barrier, shift the microbiome, and spark immune responses and oxidative stress. In people, there are hints of a connection to gut inflammation, but we still need stronger proof. Then there's the issue of chemicals. Plastics aren't pure. They carry additives like phthalates and bisphenols, and they can also soak up pollutants from the environment. These are known endocrine disruptors, chemicals that mess with hormones, metabolism, and even reproduction. In this way, microplastics may act like Trojan horses, delivering chemical cargo into our bodies and releasing it where it doesn't belong. And that leads us to reproduction. Researchers have now found plastic particles in human placentas, in breast milk, and even in testes and semen. In animals, these exposures reduce sperm counts, change hormone levels, and damage ovarian function. Some human studies are starting to link higher microplastic levels with lower sperm quality. We don't have all the answers yet, but the signs are worrying. Finally, cancer. Here, the picture is more cautious. The mechanisms are there: chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and DNA damage, all of which are known routes toward cancer. Lab work supports that concern, but human-level evidence is still limited. What we do know with more confidence is that the chemicals associated with plastics, like certain phthalates and PFAS, already have stronger links to cancer, which means one of the simplest things we can do is cut down on heating food in plastic or storing hot food in it, since that's where chemical leaching is worst. So while the science isn't finished, the direction is clear. Microplastics aren't just tiny litter. They have plausible, and in some cases already demonstrated ways to affect our hearts, lungs, guts, hormones, fertility, and maybe even cancer risk. The impact of microplastics doesn't stop with us. In the oceans, corals are far more likely to get sick when plastic touches them. Tiny fragments cut their tissue, introduce bacteria, and spread disease across reefs. Fish and smaller animals show a similar pattern. With microplastics in their system, they eat less, grow slower, and struggle to reproduce. Inside, scientists find stress and cell damage. The details vary by species, but the trend is clear. Microplastics add pressure life never evolved to face. On land, wastewater plants capture many particles from laundry and drains. But those don't disappear. They collect in sewage sludge. And since sludge is often used as fertilizer, plastics end up in farm soil, where they linger for years and mix back into the food system. Whether in corals, fish, or farmland, the story repeats. Microplastics travel, they persist, and they leave stress in their wake. You've probably heard the headline, "We eat a credit card of plastic every week." It's catchy, but not quite true. Later analyses showed big flaws in how that number was calculated. We do ingest and inhale microplastics, just not a whole credit card's worth. Alarm makes headlines, but accuracy helps us act smarter. So, what can we actually do about microplastics? The good news is, small changes really do make a difference. And some steps have a much bigger impact than others. Let's start with the ones that matter most. First, water and food. If your tap water is safe to drink, use it with a good filter. That cuts down a lot of particles compared to bottled water. And avoid heating food in plastic. Hot soup in a plastic container or coffee in a plastic cup can shed thousands of tiny pieces. Use glass, ceramic, or stainless steel instead. Even with tea, loose leaf in a metal infuser is far better than a plastic tea bag that leaks particles when boiled. Second, the kitchen. Swap out old plastic cutting boards for wood or bamboo, especially if they're deeply scratched. That's where plastic shavings come from. And retire plastic containers once they're too worn down. Third, the air around us. Indoors, most of the dust we breathe actually comes from synthetic fibers. You can cut that by ventilating, using a HEPA purifier, or even a simple DIY fan filter, vacuuming with HEPA, and wiping dust with a damp cloth instead of just pushing it around. Choosing natural fabrics and washing synthetics less often also helps. Speaking of laundry, washing clothes is one of the biggest fiber sources. Wash on cold and gentle settings, do full loads, and try using a microfiber capture bag or filter. Front-loading machines also shed less than the old top-loaders. Then there are nice extras. Buy loose produce when you can, instead of heavily wrapped items. Store leftovers in glass. For babies, glass bottles and silicone nipples are safer than heating formula in plastic. And of course, it's not just about what we do at home. System-level changes matter. Things like reducing single-use plastics, requiring washing machine filters, making textiles and tires that shed less, and improving wastewater treatment. These are bigger, collective fixes, but they start with people like us asking for them. The key is this: focus on the high-impact habits first, then add the smaller upgrades as you go. Every step cuts down exposure, and every step adds up. We can't vacuum every last particle out of the world, or out of ourselves, but we can cut the biggest exposures right now. And we can push for smarter design and better policies in the future. Small actions matter, because it was tiny pieces that created this problem in the first place. So let's start making tiny changes, this time in the right direction. This is Aaron Lowe from Design to Discover. Thank you for spending this time with me, exploring the tiny things that can change everything. I truly believe that knowledge isn't just power, it's hope, and it's the spark that helps us make better choices for our health, our planet, and our future. If this video gave you something to think about, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, or even the small changes you're planning to make. Together, our little discoveries can grow into something big.